And I'm here with another chapter book read aloud, and it is chapter 4 of Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone by J.K. Rowling, and I'm reading from the illustrated edition that was illustrated by Jim Kay. Um, Chapter 4, The Keeper of the Keys. Boom! They knocked again. Dudley jerked awake. "Where's the cannon?" he said stupidly. There was a crash behind them, and Uncle Vernon came skidding into the room. He was holding a rifle in his hands. Now they knew what had been in the long, thin package he had brought with him. "Who's there?" he shouted. "I warn you, I'm armed." There was a pause, and then smash! The door was hit with such force it swung clean off its hinges. With a deafening crash, landed flat on the floor. A giant of a man was standing in the doorway. His face was almost completely hidden by a long, shaggy mane of hair and a wild, tangled beard. But you could make out his eyes, glinting like black beetles under all the hair. The giant squeezed his way into the hut, stooping so that his head just brushed the ceiling. He bent down, picked up the door, and fitted it easily back into frame. The noise of the storm outside dropped a little, and he turned to look at them all. "Couldn't make us a cup of tea, could you? It's not been an easy journey." He strode over to the sofa where Dudley sat frozen in fear. "Budge up, you great lump," he said. Dudley squeaked and ran to hide behind his mother, who was crouching terrified behind Uncle Vernon. "And here's Harry," said the giant. Harry looked up into the fierce, wild, shadowy face and saw the beetle eyes were crinkled in a smile. "Last time I saw you, you was only a baby," said the giant. "Yeah, you look a lot like your dad, but you got your mom's eyes." Uncle Vernon made a funny rasping noise. I demand you leave this house at once, sir," he said. "You're breaking and entering." "Ah, shut up, Dursley, you great prune," said the giant. He reached over the back of the sofa, jerked the gun out of Uncle Vernon's hand, and bent it into a knot as easily if it had been made of rubber, and threw it into the corner of the room. Uncle Vernon made another funny noise, like a mouse being trotted on. "Anyway, Harry," he said, turning his back on the Dursleys. "Very happy birthday to you. Got something for you here. I might have sat on it at some point, but it'll taste all right." From the inside pocket of his black overcoat, he pulled a slightly squashed box. Harry opened it with trembling fingers. Inside was a large, sticky chocolate cake with "Happy Birthday, Harry" written on it in green icing. Harry looked up at the giant. He meant to say thank you, but the words got lost on the way to his mouth, and instead he said, "Who are you?" The giant chuckled. "True. I haven't introduced myself. Rubeus Hagrid, keeper of the keys and grounds at Hogwarts." He held out an enormous hand and shook Harry's whole arm. "What about the tea, then, eh?" he said, rubbing his hands together. "I'd not say no to something stronger if you got it, mind." His eyes fell on the empty grate with the shriveled crisp packets in it, and he snorted. He bent down over the fireplace. They couldn't see what he was doing, but when he drew back a second later, there was a roaring fire there. It filled the whole damp hut with flickering light, and Harry felt the warmth wash over him as though he'd sunk into a hot bath. The giant sat back down on the sofa, which sagged under his weight, and began taking all sorts of things out of his pockets. A copper kettle, a squashy package of sausages, a poker, a teapot, several chipped mugs, and a bottle of some amber liquid, which he took a swig of before starting to make tea. Soon the hut was full of the sound and smell of sizzling sausage. Nobody said a thing while the giant was working, but as he slid the first 6 fat, juicy, slightly burned sausages from the poker, Dudley fidgeted a little. Uncle Vernon said sharply, "Don't touch anything he gives you, Dudley." The giant chuckled darkly. "Your great puddin' of a son don't need fattening any more, Dursley. Don't worry." He passed the sausages to Harry, who was so hungry he had never tasted anything so wonderful, but he still couldn't take his eyes off the giant. Finally, as nobody seemed to be able to explain anything, he said, "I'm sorry, but I still don't know who you are." A giant took a gulp of tea, wiped his mouth with the back of his hands. "Call me Hagrid," he said. "Everyone does. And like I told you, I'm the keeper of the keys at Hogwarts." "Yeah, you know all about Hogwarts, of course." No," said Harry. Hagrid looked shocked. "Sorry," Harry said quickly. "Sorry?" barked Hagrid. He turned to stare at the Dursleys, who shrank back into the shadows. It's them who should be sorry. I knew you weren't getting your letters, but I never thought that you wouldn't even know about Hogwarts, for crying out loud. Did you never wonder where your parents learned it all? Oh, what? Said Harry. Oh, what? Hagrid thundered. Now wait just 1 second. He leapt to his feet. In his anger, he seemed to fill the whole hut. The Dursleys were cowering against the wall. Do you mean to tell me, he growled at the Dursleys, that this boy, knows nothing about anything? Harry thought that this was going a bit far. He had been to school after all, and his marks weren't bad. I know some things, he said. I can, do maths and stuff. But Hagrid simply waved his hand and said, about our world, I mean. Your world, my world, your parents' world. What world? Hagrid looked as like he was about to explode. Dursley! He boomed. Uncle Vernon, who had gone very pale, whispered something that sounded like Mimblewimble. Hagrid stared wildly at Harry. But you must know about your mom and dad. I mean, they're famous. You're famous, he said. What? My mom and dad weren't famous. Were they? You don't know. You don't know. Hagrid ran his fingers through his hair, fixing Harry with a bewildered stare. You don't know what you are? He said finally. Uncle Vernon suddenly found his voice. Stop! He commanded. Stop right there, sir. I forbid you to tell the boy anything. A braver man than Vernon Dursley would have quailed under the furious look Hagrid now gave him. When Hagrid spoke, his every syllable trembled with rage. You never told him? Never told him what was in the letter from Dumbledore. I was there. I saw Dumbledore leave it, Dursley, and you've kept it from him all these years? Kept what from me? Harry said Harry eagerly. Stop! I forbid it! Yelled Uncle Vernon in a panic. Aunt Petunia gave a gasp of horror. Oh, go boil your heads, both of you, said Hagrid. Harry, you're a wizard. There was silence inside the hut. Only the sea and whistling wind could be heard. I'm a what? Gasped Harry. A wizard, of course, said Harry, sitting back down on the sofa, which groaned and sank even lower. And a thumping good one, I'd say, once we have you trained up a bit. With a mum and dad like yours, what else could you be? And I reckon it's about time you read your letter. Harry stretched out his hand at last to take the yellowish envelope, addressed in emerald green to Mr. H. Potter, the floor, hut on the rock, the sea. Pulled out the letter and read, Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. Headmaster Albus Dumbledore, Order and Merlin, First Class, Grand Sorcerer, Chief Warlock, Supreme Mugwump, International Confederation of Wizards. Dear Mr. Potter, we are pleased to inform you that you have a place at the Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. Please find enclosed a list of all necessary books and equipment. Term begins on September 1st. We await your owl no later than 31st July. Yours sincerely, Minerva McGonagall, Deputy Headmistress. Questions exploded inside Harry's head like fireworks, and he couldn't decide which to ask first. After a few minutes, he stammered, What does this mean, they await my owl? Gorgiles, that reminds me, says Hagrid, clapping a hand to his forehead with enough force to knock over a cart horse, and from yet another pocket inside his overcoat he pulled an owl, a real live, rather ruffled-looking owl, in a long quill and a roll of parchment. With his tongue between his teeth, he scribbled a note in which Harry could read upside down. Dear Mr. Dumbledore, given Harry his letter, taking him to buy his things tomorrow. Weather's horrible. Hope you are well, Hagrid. Hagrid rolled up the note and gave it to the owl, which clapped it in his beak and went to the door, and he threw the owl out in the storm. Then he came back and sat down as though this was normal as talking on the telephone. And that's where we're going to stop tonight. Let me show you a couple pictures from this. One here is Hagrid. He's a pretty cool looking guy. And then I like this one because it shows how big Hagrid is compared to Harry. All right, I hope you guys enjoyed it. We'll pick up where we left off tomorrow and see what happens, whether Harry gets to go with Hagrid. Y'all have a good night. Always keep reading.